All right, everybody. Greg Harrelson here. Looks like we are live. Abe, thanks for getting us on there. Abe, did you pick up the Facebook page, by the way?
I'm working on that right now.
Yeah, I should definitely do that. That's one of my first things that I ever do. When we do these calls, but for some reason I did not. So I'm going to do it also. Real Geeks Mastermind Group. So if any of you are listening today, or when for those of you that are listening, please feel free to comment, ask questions on in the Facebook chat. Today's conversation is, what do we do if the market has if the market shifts? And I was very careful at making sure that we didn't put in the title that the market has shifted, but I would be interested for those of you that are listening, if you will put into the chat whether or not you're seeing anything shifting in your particular market, whether it's average days on the market, if the listings are increasing, if the number of pendings are decreasing, or whatever you find. I'd just love to see your feedback. Before we get into the dialogue, Abe, what are we seeing in our market? Because I know you and I
Yeah,
are talking about it, and I bet you're watching it like a hawk right now. I'm assuming, based on your personality, and that's a compliment. But what are you seeing?
yeah, I'm paying very close attention to our inventory.
Yeah.
So obviously the real estate market's been on fire for well over 2 years now, or about 2 years now, and typically when you see appreciating markets or depreciating markets, particular properties will rise first in appreciation, and then they'll be followed by properties that I call maybe second quality or third quality, and so on and so forth, and then you'll have the final wave of appreciation on the properties that are probably like least demand for, least desirable, but they get kind of pushed up with the market,
Hmm.
right? So in my opinion, for us, single family homes went up first, then it went to condos that are on golf courses, and then finally, as of maybe middle of December of last year up until about middle of April this year, we finally saw the oceanfront condos get a nice spike, right? So
Hmm.
with the first quarter this year, we saw really good appreciation, probably a 20% appreciation just in those 4 months alone in oceanfront condos.
Hmm.
Now, when you look at inventory, which I track every single day, as of April 15th, that seems to be the date. April 15th, there's a noticeable difference in oceanfront condo inventory. So we're starting to see that number rise.
Yeah.
So it's a significant change. Between April 15th and now, there's a significant change. So for the longest time, we had, as inventory was moving along, the same number of pendings was moving along with it. And now we're starting to see some separation where inventory is increasing, but pendings are actually going down.
Hmm.
So to me, and that's 45 days worth of data. It's going to be 2 months here real soon. If that trend continues, to me, that's a clear sign, at least in our market, that the shift has begun with those properties. Um, so that's
Yeah.
that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing here.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you and I we're going to speak for our market, because I
Right.
don't want to speak for everyone's market. And then again, and also for those of you that are listening, could you please put in the comment, like, if you're seeing any noticeable differences in any numbers or any data in your market? I really love to get that feedback from you. And if you're listening and you don't see of anything that's shifting in your market, then also just put that nope, no shift here. Everything is fantastic. Love to hear that. Bobby Dean says Southeast Alabama inventory is up 12% above April 1st. So that's a shift. That's a shift. Now, a shift and a crash doesn't, there's no, those are two different conversations. So we're not talking about crashing. Is your market, is a bubble bursted? We're not, that's not the conversations here. It's just whether or not there's some changes that are going on. So, we want to talk today about, um, you know, what if there is a market shift? What if the market starts to shift? What are, what's our reaction to that, or how do we respond to it? Because I think how we fare in the end during a market shift has more to do with how we respond to change more so than change itself. Would you agree with that, Abe?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And we could sit here and be spectators and see change and do nothing about it, and we'll experience the negatives of change. Or we can see change and we can respond to it, and we can, a lot of times, in many cases, benefit from it. So you and I were talking earlier, Abe, about three things that we should be focusing on. Why don't you share those three things, and then maybe we'll each give some points under each one of those. What are the three
Sure.
things that we need to focus on?
Well, let me start by defining a shift. I want to make sure we're all on the same page and get with
Okay.
the same context, right? So a shift, the literal definition is it's a slight change in position, direction, or tendency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a slight change. It doesn't have to be a crash. Greg just mentioned the word crash. No one's predicting a crash, at least that I know of. A couple of people out there in the country predicting it, but the numbers are looking solid. Will just mentioned we're praying for some more inventory, and that's precisely it. We're still in a very low inventory state across the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
So a shift could just be in a change of direction, right? So for a couple of years now, everything the price has just been going up and up and up. Inventory has been going down and down and down. So that beginning to change, even just flatten out, would be considered a shift. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
By no means are we saying a crash. The shift does not mean a crash. It just means a change in direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what? Yeah.
I just want to add before we get into the details of the meat of the conversation is, even though you're saying that, Abe, and I agree with you. Okay. So that's our truth, what you just stated. I am starting to hear agents get concerned. I'm hearing agents worrying. So it's interesting, right? It's like a shift is just it could be a slight change, not a crash, but just with a slight change, agents get worried. And I think when agents get worried, how they respond to that determines whether or not their personal business crashes. So it's not necessarily the shift that results that has negative results. It's the reaction to a shift that could have negative results to an individual agent. So in the same shifting community or market, one agent could be accelerating and one agent could be falling backwards.
Yeah, that's a great point, Greg. Look, shifts are normal. You can call them a correction as well as another term for it. They're normal. I mean, they're normal in the real estate cycles. We get cycles where prices go up and then they flatten, and then they go down a little bit. So that's very normal. We typically see that every 5 to 7 years. It's just now, ever since the recession, the Great Recession, we just haven't seen a correction. It's just been going up ever since then. So we're actually in an abnormal state right now when it comes to real estate because there hasn't been a correction in so long. And you're spot on. Just because there's a shift in a market does not mean that there has to be a shift in your production. And the agents that do get worried or nervous about it, Greg, are the ones that don't have a plan.
Yes.
Worry comes from uncertainty. So if you're uncertain of where your business is or where you're going to take your business once the market adjusts and shifts, then there's going to be some worry there. But we're going to talk about that today.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, why don't you introduce the three concepts that or the three, I don't know what we'd call them, the three things that we need to be focused on. And then I want to do a deep dive in each one of them.
Sure. Let's start with the first one, which is always the case. When the market shifts, when it begins to shift, you have to have a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is what I mean by that. You can't panic, right? You can't worry. Look, some of the greatest corporations out there, some of the best agents in the country started when the market was going down.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Greg? I know you and I talked about where you picked up a lot of market share during the last shift heading downwards. Right, there's an opportunity out there. So the first thing to think about is just because there's a shift in the market doesn't mean that your personal business has to go down.
That's right. Yeah. And so what my coach used to tell me, and he said it many times, and I've said it probably more times than he said it now. I've quoted him so many times, and that is that you gain market share in a declining market. You fight to maintain market share in an increasing market. So most people lose market share in a hot market. And the reason is not because their number one competitor takes market share from them. It's because there's a lot of agents, new licensees that get in the business. And if 1,000 new licensees get in the business and they have 2 friends or family members that do business with them, that's 2,000 transactions that they take out of the marketplace. So in a hot market, when everyone's getting their license, it's diluting the per person production. So you lose market share, or you fight to maintain and sometimes lose market share in a good market, but you gain market share in a down market.
Yeah,
So from a mindset standpoint, I have a choice. I could say, oh my gosh, I might not make any sales, or I might, oh my gosh, there might be less sales. Or I could say, this is the opportunity to gain market share. Right? That's a mindset. You have a choice. You're at a crossroad. When a shift occurs, it's like you're at a crossroad. And is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? You have to choose that.
No question. It starts saying, look, there's always going to be sales. There's always going to be transactions. No matter what the economy has done over the years, over the decades, there's always going to be buyers. There's always going to be sellers. There's going to be foreclosures. There's going to be short sales. That always happened. Even if you go back and look at the height of 2004, 2005, there was short sales and foreclosures during that time when prices were going through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This last COVID spike that we had these last 2 years with prices going up, if it wasn't for foreclosure moratoriums, we would have had foreclosures and short sales. So there's always going to be stuff out there, and there's always going to be approximately 6 million homes sold, give or take, every single year. That number may drop to 5.5 million. Last year, it went up to 6.12 million, but there's always going to be somewhere in that range. So there's always going to be business out there for you, but you have to shift your mindset and some of the other things within your business to be able to capitalize on that opportunity.
Yes. Yes. Okay, got it. So the first thing is whenever there's a shift, what we want to focus on, and you said it, mindset, conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and activities. It's all about how you fare in a shifting market will be more influenced by the changes in mindset, changes in conversations, and changes in activities. So under mindset, what is one or two things what are you saying right now to yourself, Abe? What are you saying? Well, you're seeing a little bit of market shift. So how are you managing your mindset?
So my mindset is I'm still going to get my business. It's going to be out there. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually going to see some separation between myself and the competing agents, and especially in the sense of market knowledge. As the market starts to shift, you're going to see more and more stuff on the news, and the media's hyping this stuff up. They're going to talk about market crashing. They're going to talk about foreclosures up 91%. They're going to talk about these things. And what that's going to do is create fear and hysteria with the consumers. So mm-hmm. my advantage in going into this, I'm actually looking forward to this, because what I'm going to bring is certainty to the consumer. What I'm going to bring is real data and be able to explain to them what a 90% increase in foreclosures means, right? Mm-hmm. That, okay, the reason we have a 90% increase is because we had no foreclosures last year. So of course it's going to increase that much. Right. So right now, the consumer is going to need certainty. They're going to need some things to bring some clarity and insight to what's really happened. They're going to need real data. Mm-hmm. So my mindset is that's a perfect opening for me, because that's my style and that's what works for me.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's other things that the consumer is going to be looking for. So depending on what your strengths are, it's all about shifting your mind that this market is going to be ideal for you. Now, why? You have to determine what that is. What are you going to bring to the consumer going into this?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I would add is when if I notice that there's some sort of shift, I always think of there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. When anything changes, that opens up new opportunities. And my responsibility is to find that opportunity. So that's where part of my mind goes. I wrote down here that there's the consumer appreciates professionalism and skills and knowledge. So when the market's too hot, they don't care who they work with. It's all about who's the cheapest. Now, we know cheapest isn't always the least expensive, but the consumer runs towards cheap. When there's a little bit of uncertainty because the market is shift, the consumer runs back to the most knowledgeable. So I feel pretty strong about my knowledge about the real estate market. So my mindset, when I see a little bit of change, my mindset goes to, okay, there's going to be more people seeking me out. There's going to be more people looking for a knowledgeable agent. There's going to be less people giving their brother's cousin's niece a listing because they don't have any faith that they have a lot of knowledge. So some of those transactions that are going to people that really don't have a lot of knowledge are shifting back to the agents that have the knowledge. That's all. This is all mindset. So then I think, well, gosh, a shift could really work in my favor. So the conversation today is, what do we do if the real estate market starts to shift? Well, you immediately adopt these types of mindsets. So the second one is conversations. Okay. So what are a few thoughts on how you would shift your conversations right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think conversations are already started to change. I think most people out there in the country are going to agree, as far as agents, that the conversations are beginning to shift with people. Sellers are talking differently. Buyers are talking differently. So I think you have to be ready to have, especially financial conversations. I think that's going to come into play more and more now, because it's not as easy as just putting the home on the market at any price that they want. So being able to have financial conversations with people, being able to really present the right pricing strategies to list a home, things like that are going to be more and more important. Talking about what price to come in as an offer when there's listings out there, right? You're not competing with 30, 40 other offers at a time. So all these things begin to change. So your ability to have a financial conversation with people, I think, becomes stronger and stronger. And then also being able to explain to them that there's a big difference in what the strategy is in the appreciating market as opposed to a depreciating market. So those are the types of conversations you have to get well versed in and be able to present to the consumer.
Yeah, the one that I would add under conversations is two things. I'm going to give two tips. Number one is future pacing. So when you're working with a buyer, you're working with a seller, what you want to do is you want to future pace. So let's just assume I'm working with a seller right now, and maybe they're a little optimistic on pricing. They want to price the property at $500,000. I think it should be at $475,000. But they still believe the market's going up and there's multiple offers still in the marketplace, and that might be the case. When I take the listing and I feel in my heart that it might be a little bit out of the range, well, then I'm going to take the listing. And then after I get the listing signed, I'm going to say to the seller, Abe, I'm excited to get started here with you. I just want you to know that, the market is kind of like it's changing a little bit. But what I really want you to feel comfortable with is knowing that I'm going to constantly monitor the market. And in the event I see any changes that you need to know about, I'll be the first to relay that information. You can kind of expect that every 2 weeks, I'm going to reevaluate. And then I'll just shoot you a message, give you a call if there's anything that we need to talk about, and if we ever need to make any adjustments in the future. But I hope you'll appreciate that kind of communication. Does that work for you? Oh, yes, great. I love communication. That is what I'm doing, is I'm future pacing that in the event the market did shift to a point where I had to ask for a price reduction, that I could go back to them and say, remember when I told you I was going to reevaluate? Well, I did that, and here's my thoughts. See, I can future pace, which warms them up to a potential conversation in the future. The second shift that I would make in the conversations right now is, don't tell people the market is changing. Don't tell people you need to lower your price. Don't tell people I can't get you that price. Those words are not good. Those are not proper ways to communicate right now. The proper way to communicate right now would be, the market is telling us we may need to go a little bit lower. The market tells us that at this price, it may sit on the market for a while. The market is telling us that this should be the amount that we should offer when we present the offer. The market is telling us. If you can see, there's a pattern here. The market is telling us. What I'm doing is I'm blaming the market. I'm positioning myself as the interpreter, and I'm blaming the market versus positioning myself as I'm telling you, you need to reduce the property price. If I do that, then they might get mad at me. But when I say, based on what the market's telling us, the market says you may need to adjust the price. Well, if they get mad at the market. They don't get at me. I'm just the interpreter. I'm just the messenger. Shift in mindset, shift in conversations. This is an example of how you could shift some conversations and really grow your business. People will appreciate that. Now, the last one is activities, Abe. What are your thoughts on activities? Where are you shifting activities?
Yes, so hopefully you guys out there have been listening to us and actually been tracking your numbers. So if you've been tracking your numbers, you know what your conversions are, you know what your ratios are. So you know exactly how many buyers you have to talk to, how many offers you have to write to get a deal accepted. You know how many sellers you talk to, how many appointments you go on to get a listing. So going into a shift, what you need to do is you need to increase the amount of activity that you've been doing. So take the numbers that you've been doing and pad them by about 25%. Okay, because if the market does go down, okay, and let's just say prices go down 20%, just hypothetical, right? Making up numbers here, then your average commission check is going to go down 20% as well, right? So in order to offset that, then you need to do another 20% more in production. So take a look at your numbers. If you haven't been tracking your numbers, this is crucial. This is the time to actually start tracking them, because you want to know. I mean, there's nobody out there that runs a company or runs a business and doesn't know what their key numbers are. So you should know what your numbers are. Start tracking them, and this way you have a plan to go by. And then I would just pad it a little bit, create more, have more conversations with people, which is going to lead to more business, and you'll be completely fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Increase your lead generation by 25%. What I would add also is touch your database at a much higher level. Touch the database at a much higher level. Meaning, like say your Real Geeks database, when is the last time that you've touched 100% of the people in your database? Make it immediately. Like, touch everybody in your database. Now you can use the workflows, okay? You may have a database that's larger than what you could physically call, and fantastic if you have a database that large, that's great. But don't let there be any excuses why you don't touch your database, because there is a chance that it may take a few more contacts and conversations to get the same amount of business. Hence why Abe said increase generation. One reason is why you have to increase your generation by 25%. So one way that you can immediately increase the amount of people that you're communicating with is by really working your Real Geeks database, working the workflows. Kick off a re-engagement workflow and get people communicating, get people active in your conversation, in your database. You're going to have more people say to you, I'm just going to see what happens in the market. Now, that's different than the conversation we're having about, well, inventory level is low. I have no idea what's going on in the stock market today. I haven't looked. I don't know if it's up or it's down, but there's a lot of volatility. I don't know what the interest rate is today, but it's probably not down too much. My personal banker sent me a message that said in the next 60 days, interest rates are going to go up by 2%, like 2% more than it is right now.
Wow. That's
my personal banker sent me a personal text letting me know that that's happening. Okay. I know that there's conversations in the news, don't know exactly what there are, and they're throwing around like, is it going to be inflation or is it going to be a recession? Now, like, all of these conversations that are going on, your buyers are hearing them. And it's just logical to believe that the impact of the buyers hearing all that could be that they may start saying, I think we'll just wait and see what happens. So there's going to be a couple things. Let's just say that you're working with 10 buyers right now, and 10 of those buyers have a pre-approval. If the interest rates go up by 1% more, I bet you 22 of those 10 are no longer approved for the price that you're showing them. I bet you another 2 of those 10 are going to tell us, I think I'm going to wait. Now, if I'm right, and only you'll be able to determine that in the future, that 2 out of your 10 will no longer be approved, and 2 of your 10 are going to say, I'm just going to wait. That means you lost 4 opportunities of 10 potentials. That's 40%. I don't think that that's unrealistic. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to balance that out by making sure that you're increasing the amount of times that you're touching your Real Geeks database, as well as increasing the amount of other lead generation that you're doing. So what do we do if the real estate market starts to shift? We refocus on our mindset. We understand and shift the conversations, and we increase our activities. And the people who do those three things will likely gain market share and grow. And the people who don't will likely see a decrease. Any final words on that, Abe?
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to set yourself apart from the competition. Okay, the consumer is going to need you. Greg said, reach out to your database. And look, it doesn't have to be hard selling. The same way these last 2 years, every single person in the country was curious about what their home is worth. Now it's going to be they're curious about whether they're losing their equity, whether the market's going to crash. So even just reaching out to them and just kind of giving them information, giving them data that's actually real data based on an expert talking, not the media hyping it up. That in itself will go a long way in building a relationship with your database. This is a time. Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love to see what Kevin McCarthy would say about this, but I would be willing to bet. I'm going to guess that more people will be looking at market activity reports when the market's going down than they were looking at market activity reports when they were going up.
That's a good point. I think I agree.
Yeah. So for those of you, another thing, activity, get more people on market activity reports immediately. So you can be the professional that's educating them, that's informing them. And remember, I said that the consumer appreciates professionalism, knowledge, and skills. So be the person that has the knowledge, that's educating them, and you're likely going to be the person that gets their call when they say, hey, I think I'm going to do something.
Yeah, let me add one more thing. Look, you're not going to be able to control what's going to happen in the real estate market or the economy. So don't sit there and whine and complain about it. What you can control is your activity and what you do and how you react to it. That's all you can do. So focus on that and capitalize on what's going to change when it changes.
Yeah. All right, Abe. Well, I sure do appreciate you, meeting me once again. We will connect next week and go from there. And I'll continue to monitor the comments. And if there's some things that I can comment on, I will surely do that over the next day or so. Until next week. Thanks, Abe.
See you.
Bye-bye.